Welcome to She Said Homestead, the podcast that explores homesteading from a range of perspectives. We're Sage and Mickayla, two homesteaders, each with unique experiences, properties, and future goals for our homesteads. We're discussing various homesteading topics, sharing our personal experiences as women working full-time who are managing homesteads as well, and shining a light on the stories of other inspiring homesteaders.
Before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy our podcast, please consider leaving a review. It really helps us grow and share these homesteading stories with even more people. Hey there, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Mickayla from Calico Cow Acres.
And I'm Sage from Terra Nova Acres, and we both have homesteads in Western North Carolina.
Today we're going to do a sort of an interview with Sage on what to expect when your sheep are expecting. And we're going to chat about her experience so far with lambing and milking her sheep and all that good stuff. But before we get into that, what did you do this week, Sage?
This week has been definitely a lot of spring energy. So up until this point for a while, I don't know, things have just been kind of stagnant around here. This week has just been like weird and chaotic. Like I woke up one morning to an Instacart driver dropping off groceries on my porch that I did not order. My least favorite way in the entire world to wake up, by the way, because my guard dog was outside and my other dog was inside and both of them were losing their minds. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? I've had a bunch of stuff like break, like my espresso machine broke, which if you have any idea how much I rely on coffee to get through my day is a bad deal. And then like my washing machine overflowed and flooded my laundry room and like other plumbing, like my bathroom sink just refuses to drain. So I don't know. There's just like lots of weird little things going on this week that is kind of kicking my butt and making me do things about things which I have not been great about for the last few months. So new energy, things are blooming, things are breaking. So I have a lot of things to figure out. I did order a new espresso machine though. That was priority over fixing my laundry because of course it is. Because of that, I have been doing a lot of organizing and cleaning. I had to take everything out of my laundry room, which that's kind of my just catch-all room. I don't want to deal with this right now. I'm just going to shove it in this corner and deal with it later. Funny thing is, if you do that long enough, you eventually have to deal with it. So it's all sitting on my front porch right now. And I'm glad that the clematis has started to leaf out again so that my neighbors can't see all my mess. So no one knows except for me. Finally got around to starting my big batch, like main batch of seeds, and that felt good to get out of the way. I still have a lot more to start, but that was a big deal to kind of get that out of the way. And also my bare root stock order for the year showed up yesterday. I think that was yesterday, which I always order that over the winter, and I'm like, oh, spring sage will deal with that. And it's now spring, and I have like 100. They're red cedars, but they're technically junipers to plant, and also about 100 rooted willow cuttings to plant somewhere, with all my spare time and energy. So spend my week.
I remember when we were recording Laura's episode of, I guess it's like a month and a half ago now, or 2 months ago, we were talking about breaking dishwashers and appliances and whatnot. And I was saying, like, it's gonna happen soon that, like, my dishwasher's probably gonna break. I swear, like, my appliances are gonna start breaking. And I think maybe I jinxed you.
So you're the reason.
Yeah, but it was me. I'm sorry. Maybe, just saying, maybe if you buy a dishwasher, it will, like, reverse all of that and everything will work again. I think that's how that works.
I would love for it to work that way. Unfortunately, it does not.
My laundry room is also I don't know what to do with this. It's the junk drawer of the house, basically. And I currently, like, our bird feed is out there. I currently have to move like 16 things out of the way every morning to be able to, like, access my bird food. And every morning, like, I need to clean this up today. And then 5 p.m. hits and I'm like, I want to go outside and do a project.
Yeah, isn't it funny how just cleaning is never it never lands on the priority list?
Yeah. Tis
At
tis the
least right.
season to ignore the house.
What about you? What have you been up to this week?
We've also had a busy spring week, and I feel like that's going to be the theme going forward. I think the day after we recorded, or the same night we recorded last week, we went out to close up our ducks for the night, and our friend Sergey the skunk was in there, little hot, taking a nap. And we've encountered him like multiple times since. Uh, so we really need to get our dig barrier done this year. It's just like logs piled up in cinder blocks and stuff, and he keeps finding ways in. But he keeps going in the chicken coop now too, or the run. We have tires in there for their dust baths, and we keep finding him curled up in the tire sleeping because it's like warm, I think. Which is so he's a baby skunk. He's so cute. And he's never like he hasn't sprayed us yet. There was a different baby one last year. They were both Sergey. So that was fun. Not really into the whole skunk season. Really not looking forward to the snake season, especially. It finally freaking rained. I can't remember if I said that last week, but because like I don't remember at this point when it started raining. It's been raining every day this week, and it's lovely. It's like absolutely wonderful. We haven't gotten any rain for a very long time, and I think the wildfires that we've been dealing with now are like almost 100% contained after like weeks of dealing with them. It finally started raining really well. Like we got a really good rain on Sunday. Just as soon as we finished filming our video and putting in our new berry trellises, we just put in 20 feet of raspberry trellis and I think 12 feet of blackberry trellis, and then a big grape trellis with two grape plants under it. That was like our brand deal that we were working with Food Forest Nursery. So that was like our whole weekend. We did that. I managed to plant onions this week. All of my onions finally. I've got a whole bunch to bring to Red this weekend because I have so many extra. We had another swollen duck toe situation. I don't know. They've been going in the woods and there's lots of thorny things on our property, and little Edith, she always has like the most sensitive feet. So she got a thorn in her foot again, I think, and she's doing better now, but I spent like all of my day on Tuesday, I think, just with her in my bathtub and checking on her. And then honestly, I've just been potting up seedlings like crazy, starting more seeds, and starting the oh so beloved process of weeding last year's weeds out of my garden, whilst this year's weeds also pop up. Lots of weeding happening.
I have noticed that it's not only that the leaves are starting to pop up on the trees and things are starting to spring to life, but the weeds also are starting to spring to life. And especially in the section that I just moved the chickens out of so that I could get them acquainted to their new situation. I'm like, maybe I should have waited. Maybe I should have waited another week to let them gnaw this stuff down. But I'm gonna battle that until October. It's just life.
I feel like a question we need to add to like the beginning of our episodes for the time being for like springtime is what new stuff is growing outside right now other than weeds at your homestead.
Other than weeds. Oof. Okay, then narrows it down. Um, okay, can I count the weeds that I forage and use because they're useful? I'm gonna count those. The dandelions have like they've been around for a while, the leaves, but they're flowering. And so I went and picked those. The wild violets, I don't know if they're technically a weed. They pop up like weeds. But I did actually manage to pick some of those and dry them so that I have them in my cabinet when allergies roll around to where I just feel like having them in a tea. Purple dead nettle, notice a lot of that. But beyond the weeds, I have a saucer magnolia in my front yard, which blooms and it's really beautiful and it's pink. And this is the first year that it has not gotten nipped by frost after it started budding out. So this is the first year that I've seen it like do its full thing. And it's really crazy. Like truly the whole tree is just like this pink like cloud. And now with all the rain and the wind and stuff, the petals are starting to fall off. And so my whole front yard is just a carpet of like pink petals too. I think those are the main things, like just baby leaves on the trees. And I did actually notice like a couple hours ago, I was walking past the dogwoods and noticed that their buds are starting to swell. So hopefully they'll bloom here soon. What about you? Because I know that you tend to be a little bit ahead of me, and so things look different where you are.
Yeah, our Bradford pears and I think the dogwood, we only have a couple dogwoods on our property, but those bloomed like a couple weeks ago. Everything here is green. Our even our oak trees, which tend to be one of the last things to green up, are starting to like they have baby leaves on them. The pecan is like the very last thing that like those trees are really late as far as leafing out goes, and they haven't really started yet. They have buds, but that's like everything else is green. Or like the red maples are bright red right now, or I always forget what they're called. They're purple. They're like native purple trees. They're like pinkish purple. Do you know what they are?
Red
Uh,
buds?
red buds. Yes, that's the word. Um, those are all bright purple right now. We actually have a bunch of stuff in the garden. So like I have all of the things that you said, like dandelions and violets going crazy right now. I got some tulips that I've never seen before grow here that I didn't plant. Again, third year being here, which is really interesting. I don't know if it's because we're like uncovering things and like cleaning stuff up that they're able to pop through finally, but I'm not complaining. They're bright red and they're really pretty. And then so in the garden we have potatoes popping up, the plants finally. They're like all about 4 to 6 inches tall, popping through the straw. We also have peas growing out there. They're probably about the same height as the potatoes, like 6 inches. One of the rows, Penny, the chicken, got out and like decimated. So hopefully those ones come back. And then I have some brassicas out there. I direct sowed a bunch of like radishes, bok choy, lettuce greens, spinach, carrots, all that kind of stuff, and it's all just starting to barely pop up. I think that like other than some herbs, like perennial things in the garden, that's pretty much what's growing out there. I have some flower seeds coming up. I have some things that I thought were flower seeds coming up, and they're not. Thank you, Baker Creek. Uh, they are a weed. I think that's all.
Yeah, I'm excited to go to Reds this weekend. And I think I'm gonna take both of my seed binders. So one is vegetables and one is flowers. Because when I was starting seeds this weekend, like there are some things that I just know are kind of already older and the germination rate's gonna go down. And like I have so many things that I'm just not gonna use the seed packet up before they go bad, basically. And I'm like, it's so silly that I just like have all this collection myself. I really wish there was a way to share them. And I was like, maybe I'll bring them to Reds, and if people want to pick from that, they can, and if not, oh well. But I feel better about that having an opportunity to kind of seed swap and do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that will be really interesting. I plan to bring a bunch of cuttings of mints and whatnot because I have boatloads and uh I have like other things that I need to take cuttings of, and I'm gonna try and just like stick them in some water, and you guys can try and root them. But I have seeds I'm gonna try and go through to bring some. I might bring some seedlings. I don't know if I'll get around to like potting them up into the right things, but I have extra seedlings for like later this month, probably, or early May that I need to give away to people. So we might have to trade and or offload some seedlings onto friends in the next month or so as well.
Yeah, let me know if you want any willow or juniper trees. 'Cause I have a lot. I had to get like 100 so that they were cheaper per. It's like you can spend the exact same amount of money on a bundle of 50 as a bundle of 100, and you're like, well, why wouldn't I get 100? So I can hook you up if you want.
I literally have like my to bring list for this weekend is like the snacks I'm bringing, the craft things, the rocks for crafts, cuttings from plants, seeds. I'm bringing some deodorant to give to you guys. It's like so. I'm like, I'm gonna bring all of the things. I might bring some seedlings. It's just gonna be like here, take all of my things, party.
I like that though, because like I have my stuff that I have a ton of, and like you can only do so many things, right? But like that's the point of community, is that you get to swap all this stuff, and I don't need 1,000 Snapdragon seeds, and you don't need 20 deodorant containers, but when we pair up, it works.
I also just remembered I have to bring stuff to like measure Red and Steven's house because I'm gonna do some construction drawings for them for figuring out how they want to renovate their house. It's gonna be a full car of things to bring, but I'm excited. It's good. It should be fun. I think it'll be a good day.
Yeah, I feel like there's several of us that get together like maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, and it's fun. Because I
Yeah.
mean, how often are you in a room with a bunch of other like gardeners and homesteaders and that kind of thing?
hmm
That's rare.
I feel like we should actually talk about our topic of the day, which I'm just gonna say this title again because I really like it, is what to expect when your sheep are expecting.
Yeah, when I started to prepare for this, I found it surprisingly difficult to kind of find and compile that information, both lambing and milking, because really they go hand in hand. I mean, you have to breed your sheep in order to get milk. Um, and I could find a lot of stuff for cows and things, but sometimes with smaller ruminants, it's just different. So I want other people to benefit from the hours of rabbit holes that I've delved into, and hopefully, put this information all in one place that you can pull from it and use it if it's helpful, hopefully.
All right, so if we're going back to like the very beginning of your decision on getting sheep for your property and like how that all played out, I know there are very specific reasons you chose the sheep, and I know that like the milk is part of that. So I guess like can you give like a brief explanation again of why you chose the sheep, why you got the breed you did, and then maybe like talk about where you start with like planning for having milk from the sheep.
Sure, yeah. So the first sheep that I got my three ewes that I still have all of them. Got them as lambs. They were a couple weeks old when I got them. And one of the reasons that I was drawn to sheep over something like a cow or goats is for a cow, you need a whole lot of grass. Um, I am just one person here. I'm on a 3 acre property. My pasture is like an acre. So I don't have a ton of space. I don't want to be doing any more chores than I need to be doing. And so sheep and goats will are really more like lawn mowers than something like a cow. Also, with sheep and goats, you're not putting all of your, metaphorical eggs in one basket. If I had one animal that I was dependent on for milk and something happened to that one animal, I would be back at square one. And so I just feel like my bets are a little bit hedged having a smaller ruminant that I have more of. And also, they take away the chore of mowing for me. I might knock back some seed heads if certain stuff gets overgrown to keep things palatable for them when things grow really quickly in the summer. But there was definitely a consideration there of like, what makes sense for me in my situation? I don't have a ton of space. I don't want to be spending a whole lot of money to supplement hay to get this giant animal enough food. And looking at sheep versus goats, once I was like, okay, I'm not really looking at a cow. Goats have a reputation, at least, for kind of being Houdinis. They can be a little bit hard to contain. And again, it's just me here. I don't want to be chasing goats all the time, trying to get them back into containment. Like, just not my deal. And then whether it's true or not, I don't know because I've never really had goat's milk. Uh, but they also have a reputation for the milk just like tastes kind of distinct, whereas sheep, they don't have that distinct flavor. They have a reputation for like sweeter milk. It really is kind of just like condensed cow's milk. So that was another consideration for me. And then as far as the exact breed, I knew that I wanted a sheep. Yes, they mow my lawn, but like I really want them for the dairy products. So I knew that I wanted some sort of breed that was good with dairy. And East Frisian is arguably the highest producing dairy sheep, but it was also available in my area. So I was on Craigslist. I was looking at stuff. I see a lot of Katahdin in my area, which is more of a meat breed. And I see the occasional St. Croix, maybe a handful of other things. But I got really excited when I saw East Frisian. The other breeds that I was looking at and considering were Icelandics, or I want to say Awasi. I want to say that there's some farms around here that have them around. I could be totally misconstruing that, so sorry if that's wrong. But yeah, I saw East Frisian and I was like, I'm jumping on this. There's a dairy 30 minutes away from me that their thing is actually they have cows and goats and sheep. They have all three. And yeah, it was the right situation. I found those ewes and I started raising them up because I've never owned farm animals. Like I started with chickens, but having a ruminant, having a mammal is different. I mean, I've had house pets, I've had dogs, but also very different. And so it's like, all right, we're just gonna start from square one together. We're gonna learn together. I'm gonna get these as babies, and I'm gonna kind of slowly graduate to it. So I got them 2 years ago. Yeah. And then last year I added a ram to the flock, and then shortly thereafter he bred them. And then now we're up to this year where they had their lambs a couple months ago. And yeah, it's just been a giant learning curve.
Okay, so you have your ewes and you have your ram. If you're looking to get dairy, milk, etc. out of this, where are you starting with that?
All right, so if you're looking to get milk from your animals, it starts with breeding them first because they will only produce milk if they have had babies. So the process of getting milk starts with getting them bred. And you can either buy animals that are already bred by the previous farm or wherever they were before. In some cases, you can do AI, artificial insemination, if you care to do that. But especially like on a smaller scale, on a homestead scale, you're probably going to have a handful of females and then a breeding male. If you have a really good neighbor who has a male around, maybe you can borrow them, but especially with sheep, kind of try to stay away from that because there can be some potential issues with health concerns or parasites whenever you swap animals around. So just something to keep in mind. You figure out what works best for you. But at the end of the day, you're going to need to get your animals bred in some way, shape, or form.
After they're bred, I know that you have some interesting experience with this. How do you know that they're getting close to giving birth, lambing, that whole process?
Because I kept my ram in with my ewes, I didn't set, a time. I didn't keep them separate and set a time and say, okay, I'm going to get them bred at this specific interval. I just kind of let them do their thing because East Frisians are supposed to be seasonal breeders, and I put that to the test. If you are in a situation where you can control that exposure of when that male gets in with them and does this thing, then you can calculate 5 months out. And that is assuming that they catch. That's assuming that it works. So if you were doing something like a rent-a-buck situation with goats and you have this singular exposure, at the end of the day, you don't know if they have caught. You don't know if it's successful or, it's nature and not all of those are fully successful. It's perfectly natural and normal for some of those to end themselves, and that's just how things go. So it might not go all the way to term, and you might never know that they but assuming all goes well, assuming that you know the date that they were bred, you can basically just count 5 months out. If you don't know when they were bred, like me, then especially for sheep, it's really hard to tell until they're about a month and a half out. At about 6 weeks, you can start being like, you look extra rotund, and you might notice that they start to develop a little bit of an udder, and that's something that you gotta kind of just get in their business to figure out. There's not really a great way other than to just like crouch and look up. That's what I was doing. I can't tell you how many pictures of sheep rear ends I have on my phone because it's kind of like the garden, right? Like if you're there every day, you don't notice the incremental changes, but when you can compare pictures, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that is different. So it'd be really hard to explain if my phone were confiscated for some reason. But once you get even closer than that, signs that they're really close is you'll notice that the babies will drop. The left side is their rumen, left is lunch, and right is, I forget what the acronym is for that, but left is their rumen, it's where the food goes. The right side is the babies. So especially the right side profile, you'll notice that it kind of drops. Like they start carrying them lower, and that means that they're starting to get ready to actually have them. So once they drop, you know that it's like a couple days out. And also you can feel the tendons by their tail, kind of on either side of their tail. I found that personally really difficult because my sheep still had their full wool coat. They weren't shorn, and it's not like they're hair sheep. It's not like they're goats. It's not like it's a horse where it's easier to tell. So I couldn't really use that metric. But if you have shorn sheep or hair sheep, maybe you can use that. And then also, once they kind of go off by themselves, and especially if they start pawing at the ground, they actually try to make a nest sometimes. That's when you know, like, okay, it's happening in the next 12 hours or so. That's really like go time. That's when you need to be really keeping an eye on them.
Okay, so speaking of the timing of that, I think you've mentioned multiple times that it wasn't really when you expected them to give birth, and it wasn't really ideal because it was kind of the coldest weeks of the year. What are like the ideal times for them to actually lamb?
That'll depend a little bit. I feel like I'm going to say that a lot here, but most people aim for sometime between February and April. So in general, you want the weather to be warm enough that you're not having issues with moms dropping newborn lambs when it's 14 degrees outside, which is what happened to me because I'm learning. Uh, that's not the ideal scenario. You want it to be warm enough outside that they're not having unnecessary issues or just introducing additional stress into the situation. And you also want the grass to be growing so that the moms are able to have that readily available food source to support all this energy demand that's been placed on their body. Pregnancy not only is hard on them, and that's a recovery process in general, but asking them to produce that much milk, and especially when you have something like a dairy breed that we as humans have bred for production, you know, that's increasing maybe artificially a little bit what they would naturally volunteer in terms of their energy sources. So it's important to have that food source available for them. So if you don't have the grass growing, you can supplement that, but it's just going to cost more money. Some people do aim for earlier because the deal with sheep is that they have a finite window. They're not quite like cows or goats where you can just schedule your breeding to kind of keep various animals in milk all year. They have their time that they're going to dry off in the fall. So the earlier that you push the lambings, the longer that their milk season is going to be, and the more milk you're going to be able to get out of that season. So some people who have additional infrastructure and aren't deterred by the cold and that lack of food will push it just to be able to get a little bit more milk out of it. So knowing that I really would prefer my sheep to lamb more in March, I'm going to be doing a few things this year to hopefully delay their breeding until October.
So you really went all out your first year on accident. Like you're getting all of the milk because you're getting it from like January through into fall. That's a lot of milk.
You know, I mean, it's really on brand for me because how many things do you know me to jump into without going like full force?
Exactly zero. Once you start noticing the signs that they're going to be lambing soon, or I guess even just like in the planning process for lambing and milk, what are things that you decided to keep on hand and like got prepped for the whole lambing process?
Yeah, so just depending on how you handle it, really that preparation starts like 2 months ahead of time. And so, especially in a more industrial setting, or if you have just more animals, that's why it becomes more important to know when they were bred, because if you don't know when they were bred and they don't really start showing until a month and a half, and you need to do certain things at 2 months prior, you're kind of just out of luck there where you're guessing. So some people, especially higher producers, they have their specific regiments of things that they do like 2 months ahead of time. So it's pretty popular to do certain rounds of vaccinations, and to deworm the vaccinations and things are just going to depend on where you are. Different considerations for different climates at different places. So if you want to know more about that, I'm not the person, but you can talk to a vet about that. And some people also choose to shear their sheep roughly 6 weeks before they lamb. There's some information out there. How reliable it is, I don't know, but there is some information out there that says it's beneficial to shear the ewes about 6 weeks before lambing so that they can use more of their energy to grow the size of the lambs. So about 6 weeks is when you start worrying about like, okay, lambing's coming up and we want the lambs to be big enough that they're healthy when they're born, but also not so big that it's a struggle for mom to birth them. So there's a little bit of a delicate balance there. I didn't choose to shear them partially because it was like the middle of January, and I'm not gonna shear my sheep, in January and December, because they need that wool. So there's nothing that says that you have to do that, but at the very least, I would recommend doing what they call crutching them, which is kind of just trimming the wool around their rear end. And that's really just for sanitary reasons because it's just a bit of a messy process. And, they can't jump in a shower and like shower off, like we can. And so just tidying up the wool and everything back there is gonna help them and also help you see what's going on. When I crutched my sheep, I found it a lot easier to be able to look at things like their udders from a distance. Going back to making sure that the lambs are getting enough nutrients and just energy in general from mom before they're born. About 6 weeks before, you do also want to be really keeping an eye on the ewe's body condition and also just giving them more food than they would eat normally. So, again, I'm not a super expert on this. If you really want some detailed advice, go to someone like a veterinarian. But for me personally, I introduced more alfalfa, partially because it was like winter and there's only, they already have free choice hay. I can't give them more hay. But giving them more hay is not going to do them any good. So something that's a little bit more nutrient dense like alfalfa, and also slowly introducing grain. Anytime that you give grain to a ruminant, you want to do it very slowly because they need to be able to build up the gut microbiome to be able to process that. If you just give them a whole bunch of grain, they're going to bloat and it is going to give them health issues. Some people choose to not give their animals grain. Totally up to you. I give them a little bit because I feel like they do well with it. But yeah, that's just a personal choice. And then the last thing is setting up the lambing jugs. I don't know why they're called this, but they're basically just like little lambing pens. And if you Google lambing jug, you can get an idea of what that looks like. You don't have to buy one. I did because I was kind of going up against the clock. And so I just got some from Premier One, but you can pretty easily construct one or just have, like a stall would also work pretty well. But the lambing jug is a space where the mom can go to be away from the rest of the flock and also gives them a space to bond where they're kind of close together and just helps mom be like, okay, these are my babies. This is what my babies smell like, and keeps babies close to mom so that they can nurse after they're super confused from being born and everything's just kind of right there. It's all close.
I know that your first sheep that gave birth was kind of a like earlier surprise. Like you weren't expecting that one to give birth. You were expecting a different one to give birth. But I remember in a previous episode you said you had just like a feeling that things were happening. Were you able to like watch the full birthing process, the whole labor process for any of the sheep?
With the first one, yeah, I was shocked. So of my three ewes, there was one that was just like super pregnant, like she was just waddling around. She just looked sick of being pregnant. And oh my gosh, if I were in her shoes, I would feel the same, I'm sure. So I was convinced that she was gonna go first, but she did not. My ewe, her name is Queso, she went first, and it's just one of those things, sometimes you have those intuitive nudges where you're like, I just need to listen to this inkling. And it was like midnight, and I had no reason to think that any of them were gonna lamb. And I was like, you know what? I can't sleep. Like I need to just walk up there and just check on them. And so I walked up there and I was like, oh my God, there's a tiny little lamb there that wasn't there before. And then I found a second one and I was like, oh my gosh, when did this happen? So yeah, she was up there for like 5 hours between the time that I put them to bed and when I went and checked on them again, and she had done everything. So I didn't get to see the process for her. I did jump in and make sure everybody was dry and then turn the heat lamp on. And, I had everything up there and ready just in case ahead of time, which I'm glad I did. Put their little cute little coat capes on, keep them warm and the whole thing. So I did not witness her through any of that, but she seemed like she had it down. She was a pro, clearly, if she did it that quickly and without any warning signs. The other two, I did help. So the one who was super pregnant is the one who went next. And she did have some prolapse issues. So I knew that I was probably just going to have to like intervene to help in general. I was convinced also that she had multiple, and that was part of what led to the partial prolapse. And so I did see her first one, helped her with that one. It seemed like she had that one out for a little bit. I would guess like at least 45 minutes of trying to labor with that one before I saw that. So helped her with that one, helped her with her second one, and then her third one that she had was not alive when it was born, which was not a surprise to me. And then the last sheep that just had a single lamb, she was like screaming. She was like, I don't know what's happening, but you need to get your butt up here and figure it out and fix it. So I helped her because she was not having it. And she ended up rejecting her lamb. She did not want to take care of it. She wanted nothing to do with it. She's like, I don't know what happened. I don't want any part of this.
I mean, I don't blame her at all. I would be freaking out too if I was like, I don't know what's happening.
That would be so confusing to be an animal. And like if I could have prepared them, I would have, but they don't speak English. So I don't know.
Yeah,
There's so much I can do.
you didn't have like sit down with them and have the talk, the birds and the bees and
Diagrams,
the sheep,
schedules, charts,
the birds and the bees and the ewes and the rams.
something like that.
For the ones that you were able to help with, what did the process of their birth look like? I have zero experience with this, so I'm actually very curious.
Yeah, so the first signs is going to be that pawing at the ground, they kind of go off by themselves, and that's where you're like, okay, they're preparing, they're listening to their instincts, and so I'm going to keep an eye on you. And then the first sign that they're really in active labor, unless you can like tell that they're pushing, is that you'll notice something they call a water bag comes first. It's basically a membrane. It looks like there's urine in it. It's not urine. I guess sometimes it's clear, but it's also often yellowish. And that will come first. I guess on occasion it'll pop, so maybe it won't be full of fluid necessarily, but you'll notice a membrane. You'll notice that there's like something's going on. Once they've passed that water bag, next up is the lamb. So ideally, the next thing that you'll see is two very tiny little front hooves, followed by a face, followed by the rest of the body, and the legs last. And if they have multiple lambs, hopefully they will keep coming. And so the timeline between the water bag and the lamb and any subsequent lamb should be like 30 to 45 minutes. If it's longer than that, that's when you need to start considering like, okay, I need to intervene and need to see what's going on, that's when they might need to start helping. And again, that's going to be different for everybody, especially if you're on a larger scale. Like, you don't have time to stand around and be like, okay, that you has been doing this for 45 minutes and whatever, whatever. So it's gonna kind of depend on you, but especially being on a smaller scale, and these ewes are like borderline pets for me. I have the luxury of being able to check on them on occasion and doing that sort of thing. So for me, 30 to 45 minutes was gonna be my trigger to say, okay, I'm gonna help you out now. And then after all of the lambs are out, then comes the placenta. So that'll be like red, it'll be obvious, it'll be kind of bloody, kind of messy. But once they pass that, then they're done. Labor is all over.
Okay, so what if it doesn't come out the right way? What if the front legs aren't first?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different abnormal presentations for the lamb to come through the birth canal. So some things that might happen are it could be backwards, which is called breech, or maybe it has a hoof kind of tucked back or shoulder kind of tucked back. And all of that can be just kind of a weird angle and make it harder for the mom to do her job. And so that's why we want to be mindful of the timing and say, like, okay, is this a point where I want to intervene? In some instances, you might need to glove up and actually, put your hand in there and try to feel around for, okay, what is this? Which flying blind, that can be difficult, especially if you're a newbie. I did not have to do this, thank goodness. There was one that was breech, but at that point, you just pull it out. But pretty much any other presentation, you want to try to correct it in order for things to go smoothly, because of course we want to be cognizant of the mom in all of this, right? So yeah, you might need to go in there and untuck a hoof or untuck a shoulder, or just generally, work with her to pull that lamb out. And if you are in a situation where you're pulling, you also again want to be cognizant of the mom and work with her body. She has contractions, she has times where she pushes. You don't just want to like yank. You want to either offer something, hold it steady so that she can pull against it, or just a slight but steady, counter force. And a lot of that's going to be kind of intuitive. Like, you kind of just have to be in the situation in order to feel it out. You can only go into that with so much book knowledge before sort of the instincts and the experiential knowledge kick in. So that's kind of all I can give you.
This is making me never want to give birth.
Was it on that boat before all of this? being that close to it, I'm not gonna lie, it was a little uncomfortable for me for a lot of different reasons, but also it was really cool. Made me also more comfortable with it in a lot of ways.
It's making me more uncomfortable, so no, I'm just kidding. It's very interesting.
And then once she actually has the lamb or lambs, once everybody's out, you want to pay attention to see if she's cleaning them off. If I've helped, I'll usually put it in front of her, and especially because these ewes, they've never given birth before, like, it's a learning curve for them just as much as it is me. And so anything that I can do to help them along, like presenting this lamb that they had no idea that they could have to their face, and be like, okay, instincts kick in now. Yes. That's helpful to them. So you're looking to see if they're cleaning off their lambs. If they're not, you're going to need to step in and clean them off. You're looking to see if they are letting the lamb or lambs nurse, and if they're not, you can leave them for a little bit, but really within a couple hours you need to intervene. I guess the one asterisk there is, I did notice that with my sheep, and I believe other people have said this as well, it's not uncommon that they won't let the first lamb nurse until any subsequent lambs are also out, once they're done laboring. I can imagine that would be a very distracting process, and that you wouldn't just be in that mindset, right? And so that's not entirely unusual. But if they're done laboring and they're not letting the lambs get milk, then you're going to need to step in.
Did you need to have any extra supplies on hand for potential interventions of the lambing process?
That's what I was really nervous about. Mostly as far as intervening goes, it's more a knowledge game. There's only so much equipment you can have on hand, right? They sell all kinds of stuff. You can get a lamb resuscitator. It's like this thing that you cram over their nose and you like pull it really hard and it creates suction. But you can also just kind of like hit them pretty hard because it simulates, them dropping on the floor, which if you've assisted and they haven't kind of gotten that body shock of dropping on the ground, they might need that. There's all kinds of stuff that you can get, but in terms of looking at the things that I was particularly concerned with having on hand, that's some sort of gloves. I did get specifically obstetric gloves so that if I needed to reach into a birth canal, I could keep my wrist and forearm clean as well. But any gloves are better than no gloves. So gloves were definitely a big thing. Some sort of iodine or disinfecting solution was also really important because you want to be able to dip the lamb's umbilical cords in something to disinfect it so that they don't, get an infection that way. And I actually ended up making just kind of like a go crate that I could keep at the house because again, it was winter and so it was freezing outside. There were a couple things in there that I didn't want to freeze, but I had my iodine solution in there. I had gloves in there. I also had some of those lamb coats in there, and molasses was also something else. After the moms were done giving birth, I gave them a small bucket of warm molasses water, and that's something that I just kind of came across randomly online, and they loved it. I feel like it really helped to perk them up after that difficult, arduous, I can only imagine process. So that's something that I just kind of kept and I put it in a closet so that next year I don't have to go, what did I need? Just kind of have everything right there and it's ready to go for next year.
Well, now you have a podcast to listen to if you forget. You could listen back if you
Oh,
forget what you
I
need.
was like, what? Who's put all this information in one place? What are you talking about?
It's me. Oh, it's you.
It's almost like that's why we're here or something.
This is purely for us, not even to help anybody else, just for you to remember. It's like a voice memo.
Far more chaotic if it were only for us. I
That's true.
promise you that.
Per previous podcast episodes, I know that one of your mamas did not want to feed her baby. What happens when that happens? Like, what happens when that's the case? What do you do?
Yeah, so that's what we call the mom or the ewe rejecting her lamb. That's what that means. And there are a couple different things to look out for. If she's not cleaning off the lamb at first, that's a sign that like maybe she might not be bonding with it. There are some moms that won't clean the animal off, but if you do and then give it to her, she'll let it eat and everything will be fine. Nothing is 100% one way or 100% the other way. But another big thing is, maybe she will be like my ewe and she'll clean it off and she'll be a good mom to that point, but then she will draw the line at letting it drink any milk and just say, absolutely not. One thing that you want to keep an eye out for when it gets dangerous is they can actually start like pushing them away and kind of headbutting them. And sometimes they'll headbutt them into things like walls. And that can obviously hurt the lamb, or in some more extreme cases, can actually kill the lamb. Keeping an eye out for that, super important. But going back to making sure they get fed, the general rule of thumb is that ideally within the first hour of them being born, they are feeding because that very first milk is special. It's called colostrum. And that is incredibly important for keeping them warm, for kind of jump starting their system and keeping their vitality up. And so if they don't get colostrum within the first hour, they're going to start to taper off. And then 2 hours is okay. It's not ideal. And then once you hit 3 hours, that's when things start to get kind of dangerous territory. So if you want just one number to work off of, they need colostrum within the first 3 hours that they're alive. And the sooner they get it, the better. So if for some reason maybe mom's milk isn't in, maybe she's a great mom, but she just like doesn't have the instruments, the tools that she needs available to her right then. There are various reasons that you would need to step in. So super important to have a colostrum replacer on hand in case you need it, or maybe you've been doing this for a little bit and you've had the opportunity to freeze some colostrum and put it in the freezer for a situation like that. But 4 ounces of colostrum is the ideal situation within the first 3 hours that they're alive.
The rejection is something that you did have to deal with this year with one of your sheep, right?
Yes. Yeah, she cleaned him off, but she would not feed him and she was definitely pushing him away.
Is that something that you have to take into consideration next year when you're, or I guess later this year when you're breeding them? Are you going to try and rebreed her even though she rejected her lamb and like see if it works again and risk milking twice a day again?
Yeah, it depends on what makes sense for you. I'm attached to these sheep at this point, and so for me to sell her off, try to replace her, all this stuff, like yes, milking twice a day is a commitment, but also so is swapping her out. So she's a first time mom. It's entirely possible that next year she'll be just fine. It's entirely possible that next year I'll have more knowledge and tools at my disposal to be able to help them bond a little bit better. There's a lot of different ways that that could go. So just purely for that reason, and in my circumstances, I'm not going to say I'm not going to breed her anymore. Keeping her unbred, separated, that whole thing would just be a nightmare for my setup. So I'm going to see how it goes next year. And if she ends up just being a career terrible mom, I think I would be okay with that. I think I would make that work.
You said that one of the babies was born like not fully developed. And then did you lose another one? Okay, so what do you do with them after the fact? Like, did you bury them?
So it depends. For a lamb that was stillborn, there are potential infectious reasons that that would happen, and so I guess not knowing for certain why, you want to be extra careful and basically treat it as a biohazard. You can, I mean, I just bury it, right? But for that specifically, burying it in a place where no other sheep are going to go, they're not going to get exposed, it's not going to get dug up, it's not any of those things. And then the lamb that was fine at birth, but just kind of like didn't really have it in him. He was just like not super thrilled with the idea of being alive and just kind of just lacked vitality in general. He basically didn't eat enough to stay alive, I think is what happened. And so that wasn't really a bacterial concern. That wasn't any sort of disease that I was necessarily worried about. Like he just wasn't super thrilled being on Earth. So um him I didn't treat like a biohazard. He just went in the pasture and that was that. Buried in the
He was
pasture, not just like strewn about, to clarify.
back to the whole reason we're discussing this. Milk, like the milk is the whole reason you're doing all of the lamb things, right? I mean, other than the fact that they're adorable.
Exactly.
Okay. When do you start milking after the whole birth giving process? Obviously, there's the colostrum that you let them have as soon as possible, and you're like trying to get them bonded and whatever. When do you come in to the milking process?
So this is something that I learned the hard way this time around, actually. So when I had been online and trying to see what people do, what's normal, what just tell me, tell me what to do. I saw let them nurse like normal, don't intervene for a week at least. And then, you can start not even necessarily separating them, just milking the excess. And my first sheep who had her lambs, she ended up getting just like the very beginning subclinical, but she got mastitis basically because these higher producing milking breeds, we've bred them to make more than their babies need. And so now that I learned what not to do, I have adjusted my schedule to I'm going to start milking the first day. And when I say that, I don't mean I am taking milk from the lamb. I'm still letting the lamb have as much milk as it wants to drink. But again, these milking breeds produce more than that baby needs or even wants sometimes. And so starting on basically 24 hours after they've had their lambs, getting them up on that milking stanchion, and even if it's only a few ounces of milk, that's fine. But that does a couple of things. It makes sure that they're not developing clinical issues like mastitis, and it creates a demand for that milk. So their body is only going to produce what it thinks it needs. And so if you don't create that demand for the milk up front, their body's going to learn that. It's going to say, okay, based on this, if I keep producing too much milk, I might die literally. So I'm going to adjust this. Now, if you have a sheep that you're milking who's not necessarily a dairy breed, or maybe they're crossbred, maybe it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, they might not produce as much. And so you might have a little bit more flexibility there to start lambing, or might have a little bit more flexibility there to start milking at 1 week, or even some people let them go 4 weeks until they start milking them. It depends on your process, it depends on you, depends on the sheep that you have.
So your plan initially was to set up lamb sharing so that you kind of had a break with the milking situation. I don't think that worked out fully for you. But can you explain like what that process was supposed to look like and or what it does look like for you?
Yeah, so it's very similar to calf sharing, which might be easier to look up because there's just more information out there about cows, but calf sharing and lamb sharing are the same concept, just in different animals. When you are sharing the milk with that baby, it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So in an ideal scenario where you don't have sheep who reject their lambs and refuse to feed them, that would give you, as the person who's milking them, a break so that you can milk them once a day instead of twice a day. Or if you need to do something like go on vacation, you can just leave the baby, the lamb, with them, and they'll take care of it for like a day or two, right? It might reduce your overall milk production, but sometimes you just need to be able to build flexibility into your systems. And so that's what I was attracted to, because again, doing this by myself, I love flexibility. I love redundant systems because I'm not a perfect human being. I will never be a perfect human being. But that did not work out because my one of my ewes just didn't want to feed her lamb. But for the two ewes that are on board with the whole mothering thing, they have their lambs with them. They are together during the day, and then I separate them at night. And I started doing that at about 4 weeks old. You start with a couple hours, and then you just gradually extend that until you get to the point that they're separated overnight. And then I go and I milk in the morning. And for the ewes that I'm sharing the milk with their lambs, that's when I get basically most of the milk. I do also milk them again in the evening because I'm up there anyway, because my difficult ewe mandates that I milk her twice a day so that she stays healthy. And so I do still milk all of them twice a day, but for the ones that have lambs, I just get a little bit of milk.
If you weren't going to lamb share and you didn't have another purpose for the lambs on your property, like you weren't gonna have them as meat animals, do you sell them? What are the considerations for that, I guess?
Yeah, if you don't want to lamb share, if you want to maximize as much milk that as you can that you are getting from the ewes, you can either keep them on the same property, but separate them physically and raise the lambs on milk replacer, which is kind of expensive. If you want to do that, just a heads up. You can do that, or you can, after they've gotten their dose of colostrum, that at least that first day, then you can sell them as bottle babies to be raised by someone else, on milk replacer. And that's how I started with my ewes, right? Like, I don't want to portray it as there's something horribly wrong with selling off your lambs. I sold off a couple of my lambs because I didn't need 500 sheep on my property to keep track of. I can really keep track of myself. So I'm not putting any judgment in there. Just because it's different than how I do it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. But yeah, if you want to keep all of the milk or as much milk as you can, then obviously you don't want to share with the lamb. You're not going to do lamb sharing. You're going to keep them separate, bottle feed them, or you're going to sell them to someone else who's going to bottle feed them.
Are you milking the one sheep that doesn't want to feed her baby and feeding that milk to the lamb, or are you feeding them replacer?
That's exactly what I'm doing. It's not because I'm like, oh, you're gonna get the highest quality milk. It's purely because I don't want to buy milk replacer because it is expensive. And they do have milk replacer that's specifically for sheep. They also have multi animal that I'm sure that applies to goats and stuff too, but it is specific for sheep, just so you know. Could you get away with doing like a calf milk replacer? Sure. But is it going to be all the vitamins and nutrients and in the right proportion that they ideally need? No. So I guess just a heads up on that if you are doing milk replacer.
You said that the sheep that you lambed like at, or I guess the lambs that were born at your property that are drinking the milk from their moms grew significantly faster and they're like thriving compared to the two ram lambs you got last year, right?
They're huge. Yeah, compared to any bottle babies that I've had. So the three ewes that I have now were bottle babies. The two rams that I had last year were bottle babies. All of them were on milk replacer. And when you're on milk replacer, right, like you're not trying to feed them any more than they need. But now I have three sheep and milk, and I'm like, have the milk because I have enough. Like, take it. I don't want it. Please have it. Yeah, it's insane how fast they're growing. It's truly wild.
I feel like that says something about letting them have the milk. I feel like that would be the route I would take too, just for their health. But
Yeah, it's definitely the ideal scenario, but
all right, now that we're finally to the milk chat, what does your milking schedule look like?
I opt for a 12-hour milking schedule. In a perfect world, if they all had lambs, I would probably do once a day. I would do a 24-hour schedule because their lambs would be milking them. But because I am where I am, I'm on a 12-hour milking schedule, which is what most people do. You can also do an 8-hour milking schedule, which means you're milking 3 times a day. If production is really important to you, that's a way to keep them producing a little bit more volume. But like we just talked about, I don't need more volume. I don't need to be doing more stuff. So twice a day, mornings and evenings with sunrise, more or less, and sunset is when I'm milking.
And I know that you had to buy a bunch of different equipment as far as like milking them and then making products with the milk and all that kind of stuff. What equipment did you have to get for the actual milking process?
So I got a stanchion for the milking process, which if I really, really wanted to, I could just keep them on a lead, like have a harness that goes on their head and milk like that. And I did that for a little bit, but it's so much easier on a stanchion. Like the stanchion is worth it. You can buy those pre-made or you can make your own, whatever works for you. Also, having towels and warm water with soap, or you can get a specific teat dip, and they have like cups and it's a whole thing that you buy pre-made solution. I don't do that. I haven't had issues with just using soap and warm water and a towel, but just know that technically that's not the best way to do it. I do a lot of stuff imperfectly, and as long as my animals are healthy, I'm okay with it. Then you're also going to want some sort of bag balm, or I use olive oil while I'm milking them because if you can imagine, just it makes it a lot easier for everybody. Like, let's be kind. Oh my God. Reduce the friction, please. And then also some sort of food to just kind of bribe or distract them. I use alfalfa pellets, depending on which sheep. They each have their different feed regimen depending on their body condition. So there's one sheep that gets one handful of grain, there's one sheep that gets a couple of handfuls of grain, and there's one sheep that doesn't get any grain, just because I don't feel like she does well on it. And so that's actually milking is a unique opportunity where I can feed each of them individually. I don't have to just kind of average out what everybody needs over the group and group feed them. So that's cool. I actually really enjoy that part of milking. You can also get a milking machine if you want. I got one. I had a horrible time with it. They're a huge pain to clean. And I just get I've built up the muscles in my hands now, I guess. It was a real struggle at first. My right shoulder is going to be ripped at the end of the year, and then my left shoulder is going to be not. So I got to figure out how I'm going to even that out. But yeah, hand muscles, forearm muscles, right shoulder muscle. I had to build those up a little bit to be able to hand milk 3 sheep twice a day. It's kind of a lot. And so 3 is kind of the border of where I would be like, all right, if I have any more than 3, the milking machine is totally worth it. 3 or less, you can get by with hand milking. And then another thing is having some sort of mastitis remedy on hand. So I talked about this a little bit before, but I didn't explain it. There's subclinical mastitis and then there's clinical mastitis. To oversimplify it and draw a line to make it easy, if they have a fever, it's clinical mastitis. There's an infection, call the vet, you need antibiotics. If it's subclinical, if they have other symptoms but they don't have a fever and there's not something like obviously very wrong with them, they don't seem like they're suffering, then you can try to get away with doing some of the more home remedies, herbal remedies, whatever. There is a quote unquote natural mastitis remedy that I have kept on hand and that has saved my butt on a couple occasions, and I'll link that in the description to this for you guys. I just got it on like Chewy. I didn't have to go anywhere crazy. It's pretty widely available, and people tend to have high reviews about it. So I'll throw that down there for you, and I will always keep that on hand now because if nothing else, it's gonna help tide them over until I can call a vet if it ever does get to that situation.
Side note, I love Chewy. We get all of our cat food from there. This isn't sponsored, but it should be sponsored. I love that company. They sent me a birthday card a couple days ago with like a discount code, and whenever your pet, like if you have a pet pass away or anything, they like send like a hand-drawn little piece of art for them, and it's really cute. So buy your things from Chewy if you can.
Also, if you're trying to be cognizant of who you're giving your money to politically these days, as far as I have researched and been informed, they're a good company. And we, for some reason, live super close to a distribution center. So I ordered dog food at like 8 o'clock at night and it came noon the next day. I think they're just in general fast with shipping. But yeah, all around, fully love Chewy. If you needed that persuasion, there you go.
Chewy, sponsor us if you're listening.
Please.
I spend a lot of money there. Okay, and then the other thing I was going to add to your list is maybe like something ahead of time, like months in advance. Get like a thumb exerciser.
Yeah, honestly, it's the knuckles. This is gonna sound so weird, but it's truly the knuckles in my index finger and my middle finger were the things that suffered the most. Yeah, so I guess if you have arthritis, definitely invest in the milking machine. And something that I should have thrown on there is definitely need a container with a lid. That is non-negotiable. You gotta have something to milk into.
With that being said, how do you milk the sheep? Like, how do you go about it?
I can't tell you. the number of videos that I looked at trying to understand this before, like I'm very much I'm very much a kinesthetic learner, right? So I've got to do it. You can tell me all you want. I can read as many things, but until I do it and kind of create that neural pathway, it's not going to stick. And so it is a little bit different than milking a cow because cows have really big teats and that makes it easier. It makes it a little bit more forgiving. But with sheep and a decent amount of goats, they just have smaller teats. And so it's just a more precise motion. And so, first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your warm water and your towel and you're going to wash off their udder because they are farm animals. They do get into stuff and it's stuff that you don't want in your milk. I promise you that. And then you're going to take your oil or your bag balm or whatever you have, you're going to rub it on there. And then you're going to do something that's called stripping it. So you're just going to take the first couple squeezes of milk and let that go onto, you can let it go onto the ground if you want to be more perfect about it. You can have a container to strip it into and then discard that so that the milk doesn't get in the hay and then cause other issues. But again, I do things imperfectly, so I squirt that milk onto the ground for the first couple times. That kind of clears that canal if there's anything in there that's not going to get into the milk that you're putting in the fridge for you. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to make kind of an O with your hand. You're going to connect the end of your thumb with the end of your let's do it with the class. So many jokes I could make. Anyway, you're going to connect the tip of your thumb to the tip of your pointer finger. And Mickayla's dying laughing while on mute. I love this. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to kind of want to like push that into the udder. So something with sheep is that they really love to hold back their milk, which makes it even harder. So you're going to kind of push into their udder and then you're going to almost like I use these words gently, like don't be overly literal, but you're going to clamp or pinch at the top of their teat and then you're going to basically squeeze down with your middle finger and then your ring finger. So it's basically like you're going to the top of the teat and you're pinching it, and then you're like pushing it down a little bit and you're pushing it down a little bit until it flows out of the teat. You don't want to be like yanking down or pulling down because that sounds painful and it's just not ideal. And so it is kind of like this fine motor skill because you don't have a lot of real estate to work with. And it does get some getting used to. It's also going to be more difficult if their udder is really full. It can be hard to kind of push into their udder if everything is like there's just so much milk in there. So I guess be patient and forgiving with yourself if it takes you a little bit. It took me so long to get used to this, and I do kind of feel like I have it down now. But oh my gosh, I spent so much time up there frustrated, being like, I'm never gonna get good at this. This is terrible. Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be able to milk the sheep out and they're gonna get mastitis and it's gonna be this whole thing. I really catastrophized it. So I promise you'll get there. Be patient. It might take a little bit. It might take you like 45 minutes to milk a sheep, but you'll get to a point where you can do it in 10.
I feel like we need a full visual instruction of what this looks like for a reel.
You know, I have a YouTube video
Oh, you don't want to
because
just show
it's
me right
just
now?
gonna look
We can put it on
it's gonna look like
Instagram.
other things, and then YouTube's gonna take our this video down. And then the very last thing, you just want to make sure to wash it off again because milk, although it's delicious and it's a great food, it's also a perfect medium for bacteria because they love the sugar, they love that it's warm. So you want to make sure that their udder is clean after you're done with them. If you're lamb sharing, and you're done milking in the morning, the lambs are going to go right to their mom. So in that specific instance, I don't really worry about it because they're going to take care of everything. But just good hygiene practice to also wash off their udder after.
You've mentioned mastitis a couple of times. I feel like that's a super common issue that's dealt with dairy animals in general. And we've probably described it a little bit before, but can you kind of like go in depth a little bit more on what it is and how you've dealt with it?
Yeah, as far as complications associated with milking, that's probably the most likely one that you're gonna run into. Again, because milk is just kind of this perfect medium for bacteria, if things do get a little bit cross-contaminated. So it's totally treatable. Don't panic. But again, it's important to know the difference between if you need to call a vet and if you can try to, kind of preempt it at home. Weird parallel, but I like to think of it as like, especially as women, I feel like we know those precursor symptoms to things like UTIs, and like cranberry juice and drinking lots of water can help in some situations, but like just sometimes you just need to go to the doctor and get some antibiotics. So weird parallel, but that's what comes to mind. So if your sheep doesn't have a fever, they don't seem like they're suffering necessarily, but you're noticing either there's blood in their milk, or maybe it's clumpy, or maybe their udder is just particularly sensitive, especially if it's hot. Those are going to be the things that are your cues, like, hey, something might be going on. It might be mastitis. I need to investigate. For my sheep, I never had it get to the point where it was clinical. I never had it get to the point where they seemed like they were suffering, where they had that fever. And the few things that I noticed that really helped, one, once I found that quote unquote natural mastitis remedy, I just worked with that from there on out. But before I found that, I was doing Epsom salt soaks. I've I actually saw that because women were online talking about their mastitis too. Like as a female, as a woman, a human that produces milk, like you can get mastitis too. It's the same thing, it's just a different animal. And so what's really popular with that is doing Epsom salt soaks. So that also applies to sheep, and especially lavender for different reasons, is particularly beneficial for that. And the sheep honestly loved it. She was like looked forward to her Epsom salt udder soaks. I swear. I think she's a little bit mad that I don't do them anymore. But that was really good. That heat kind of helps break stuff up, and especially just gently massaging it. That also really helps. And I was applying coconut oil and a little bit more lavender essential oil. I like to put oil of oregano on kind of all things that are bacterial issues. I'm a little bit into herbal stuff. I'm not an expert. I'm not going to try to treat stuff like a doctor. There's a line there. You can draw that for yourself. But I also threw a little bit of oregano oil that I had on hand there and just kind of applied it to her udder in general. Again, please don't hesitate to go to a vet if it's gotten to that point. You know your animals, and you can do more research on it if you want to.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something you mentioned earlier. I can't quite remember, but in the preparation mode of lambing, and I mean, even just having livestock animals, like you should have a vet that you know that you can call or go to, or have come out, right? Like that should be something that's on your list of preparation for this. I'm just picturing, I know that this is like a human remedy for mastitis. I'm just picturing you putting cabbage leaves on her udder, because that's like a mastitis remedy for humans that I've seen a lot.
Is that mastitis? I see people do that when they are like sick of breastfeeding, and they're like, I want to dry this off. I want to be done with it. I
Yeah, it's a
There's only
mastitis
so much
remedy.
research I've done about breastfeeding as a person, because just really not interested. So,
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people do it for mastitis. They just like take the leaves and you put them like in your bra.
yeah,
But the sheep doesn't have a bra, so that wouldn't be very functional. It
that would
wouldn't
be
work very
much
well.
harder to get to stay in place. Yeah,
Like ratchet strap it.
you can be done. You can figure it out.
Okay, I have a few questions. Earlier we were talking about like when they're first bonding, and if they reject them or anything, they start kind of, you said they kind of like potentially beat them up a little bit. Or like they'll headbutt them. Do you have any issues, or is it like a thing with multiple sheep having lambs that they'll like beat each other's up?
Mm-hmm. It definitely is. Yeah, I understand why they do it from a biological perspective, because you don't want a lamb going and stealing milk from you as the sheep in this hypothetical scenario, if you have your own babies to try to feed and keep alive. You don't want somebody else's lamb coming and stealing your milk. But sometimes you are like, oh my God, be careful with each other. Like this is unnecessary. So yeah, that will happen. I've never seen it to the point that I feel like something truly bad is gonna happen, but they'll get defensive if somebody else's lamb comes up to them. For sure. They'll push them away hard.
That's so interesting. Like it's wild to me. Obviously, it makes sense. Like they only have one or two babies or a few babies, but it's like crazy that they're like five lambs here, and like the mamas know exactly which one's theirs. It's really cool. And then the other thing was, I feel like maybe you should tell us like what are some of your favorite ways, or just like the ways you've kind of leaned towards as far as processing the milk goes that you're getting. Like what are you doing with it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we could easily make that its own topic too. Typically, these days I am collecting it for several, I don't know, 4 days? We'll go with 4 days. I'm collecting for 4 days and building up like a little bit of a stockpile. And then I am cream separating it. And the reason that I don't just do it with a couple days worth of milk is because I have to break apart and hand wash every single individual piece of that cream separator. And unless you know that particular brand of hell, you can't relate because there's so many pieces that go into the thing that actually spins it and separates it. And it takes me like an hour to clean it. So, yeah, I wait until I have a decent stockpile of milk. And then with that cream, I'm making butter. I've made a batch of cream cheese, a couple batches of cream cheese. I think I'm set on cream cheese for a year. I don't eat that much cream cheese. I'm starting to do fun things like mascarpone. I am making yogurt from the skim, but the trick there is I have to add a little bit of whole sheep milk back into the skim milk. Otherwise, it'll curdle when I heat it because you have to heat yogurt to like 185. There's lots of chemistry shenanigans that's gone on with the cheese learning curve. Also making a decent amount of I always forget what it's called when it's sheep milk, but basically Parmesan.
Pecorino?
Yeah, Pecorino Romano. There we go.
Have you gotten the hang of mozzarella yet? No.
No, I tried a few times and I made like it made cheese. It was not mozzarella. And I call that farmer's cheese. It's like this failed cheese. It separates into curds and whey, but it was not the goal. So I have a whole lot of farmer's cheese now. And I kind of just need a mental break from trying so that I don't get beyond frustrated. I'll attempt it again later.
My last question. This is an interesting one. So it's actually my feed dealer. They have a flock of sheep and they do like herd shares and stuff. And they have their sheep's milk for sale, like herd share, for like a $40 initial like down payment, and then $18 a week, you get half a gallon of the sheep's milk. With that cost and like just going to pick it up every week, do you think it would be worth it to do that versus the amount that you're getting each week from your sheep and like the effort that you've put in? Like, do you think you
As
would?
in, would it be more cost effective?
No, I'm just saying like worth it in general to you. Do you think that you would ever
Me?
like if you had to
Oh,
start all over again, would you go if it was just for the milk? Like because I know your sheep help you mow and like maintain too. If it was just for the milk,
hmm.
would you do a herd share versus all of the effort you've put into this, or would you do this all over again? I'm just
If
curious.
it were just for the milk, if I got no other benefits from the sheep. Okay. I don't know because like the whole reason that I homestead at all is like a huge part of that is like the mental health aspect. Like I need this stuff to keep me moving to literally get me out of bed in the morning. Otherwise, I won't. So if it were purely like truly in a vacuum just about the milk, absolutely not. No, milk is not worth it to me. Like I before I had milk on hand because I had sheep, I was not buying dairy milk at the store. I was buying soy milk. I, through this process, have discovered that I actually prefer soy milk in my coffee still, so I'm still buying soy milk at the store. No, it's if it were purely just about the milk, would not do it. But I'm here because I have a slightly sadistic appreciation for physical labor, and I just need all of this. This is the life that I want to live. It's about so much more than just the food.
I feel like what you just said about you still buy, you have dairy sheep and you still buy milk in the store, soy milk in particular. I feel
I
like
know,
that's like
to be clear.
I feel like I, obviously that doesn't bother me whatsoever, but I feel like you got to watch your words around other homesteaders. They might not be happy about that.
Oh, whatever. I am a walking. I irritate people. I'm okay with that.
I actually ended up thinking of one more quick one. Okay, maybe it's not quick. I don't know. I thought of
I'll
another
allow it.
question. Has the difficulty of making the mozzarella and that kind of stuff made you consider like, oh, I wish I would have had goat's milk or cow's milk to do
No,
this with because of the resources like
no,
available? No?
no, no, no.
It
Absolutely
wasn't a
not.
question,
No.
see?
Yeah, that one's easy to answer.
Well, okay. So Red's sheep, she thinks are pregnant. She told me a couple days ago. And they're probably going to be lambing this month if they are. So maybe I'll have some sheep soon. We'll
I
see.
see. You won't take my sheep, but you'll take Red's sheep.
This is purely, I will take any sheep. I'll take any animal. I am an enabler for other people and also myself as far as small, cute animals go and large, cute animals. Taylor, however, loves miniature animals. And reds are tiny little shetlands and they're very cute. So he's convinced that he needs miniature sheep now.
No, it's fine. I get it. I'm just gonna take it completely personally.
You want to know what else I've thought of though? I've thought of what if we get sheep and then we never get goats just to spite all these people on YouTube telling me to get goats.
I don't know. It sounds like some pathological demand avoidance. It would be funny though. I say you do it for the plot. Purely for the plot.
And never mention it. I'm never gonna mention it or bring it up out like on my channel. I'm just gonna say we got sheep, and then people are gonna be like, "Where are the goats? Where are the pigs?" And I'm gonna link my goat fund me.
But imagine the engagement you would get. I mean, come on.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of She Said Homestead. We hope you enjoyed our chat. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Send your homesteading stories to us at shesaidhomestead@gmail.com. We can't wait to share them on the air. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram for updates and sneak peeks at what's coming up next. If you like video podcasts, make sure you subscribe to the She Said Homestead YouTube channel too. We can't thank you enough for being part of the She Said Homestead community. Until next time, happy homesteading.